The dim glow of the office illuminated Robert's face, casting long shadows that danced across the room like specters of the past. The air was thick with tension, each breath echoing in the silent room, amplifying the weight of the moment. He stood there, fingers brushing against the edge of the polished desk, where countless decisions had been made, but none so monumental as this. It was here that the threads of his life had been painstakingly unraveled, exposing the raw, aching truth he could no longer ignore. Before him, a laptop screen flickered to life, reflecting the steel in his eyes. The incriminating video was queued up, his weapon, his vindication. It was a simple file, but its contents held the power to dismantle a life built on deception. From somewhere in the shadows, a voice broke the silence, pleading, almost panicked. "Please, Robert, don't do this." The words hung in the air, a desperate attempt to claw back the inevitable. But Robert's resolve was unwavering. He had spent too many nights tormented by the whispers of betrayal, the ghost of a life he thought was unbreakable. Now the truth lay bare, and he was determined to seize control of his narrative. He glanced toward the source of the voice, his expression hardened by the months of suspicion and heartache. Here was the culmination of sleepless nights, the relentless pursuit of truth. He would not falter now. With a decisive, almost gentle motion, his finger descended upon the play button. The click was deafening, the sound of finality, a moment that sealed fates, altered destinies. The screen came alive with images that no longer surprised him, yet still cut deep into the remnants of his trust. The betrayal played out in haunting clarity, each recorded second a testament to the deceit he had uncovered. As the scenes unfolded, Robert felt a strange sense of liberation, as if a heavy shroud had been lifted. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath his ribs, but now intertwined with a burgeoning sense of empowerment. He had always believed in justice, in righting wrongs, and here he was, crafting his own justice with the tools of truth. The room faded away, leaving him alone with the satisfaction of knowing that soon, those who had wronged him would face the consequences of their actions. The edges of the video blurred, a symbolic transition back to the present moment. The journey to this pivotal point was a convoluted tapestry of love and lies, trust and treachery. But now, standing here, Robert was more certain than ever of the path he had chosen. Yet, as the scene dimmed to black, an echoing question lingered in the air. A question the audience would carry with them, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. How had it all begun? The kitchen was filled with the soft golden light of a new day, casting a warm glow over the family breakfast table. The gentle clinking of cutlery and the steaming aroma of freshly brewed coffee created a tranquil morning symphony. Here was the heart of Robert's life, a sanctuary built on foundations he once believed were solid and unshakable. His eyes moved across the table, taking in the familiar scene with a sense of pride. His son, Mark, animatedly recounted tales from school, his youthful exuberance infectious. His daughter, Sophie, sat opposite, her face alight with laughter at her brother's antics. It was a scene Robert had cherished for years, a testament to the life he had carefully curated. Across the table, his wife Lisa smiled, a picture of effortless grace and warmth. Her laughter blended with the children's, a melody Robert had always adored. She reached for his hand across the table, her touch a familiar comfort. He felt a pang of satisfaction, a deep-seated belief that he had achieved what many sought, a successful career, a loving family, harmony in a chaotic world. But beneath this picture-perfect moment lay whispers of unease, subtle tremors that only now, in hindsight, began to resonate. Robert had built his life on certainty, on trust, and yet, the foundation seemed to tremble beneath the weight of unspoken truths. As he watched Lisa interact with their children, he felt a flicker of doubt, a shadow flitting across his contentment. There was a slight tension in the way her smile faltered momentarily, a fleeting glimpse of something hidden beneath the surface. He had always dismissed such thoughts, attributing them to the pressures of their busy lives. But now, he couldn't help but wonder if they were harbingers of the storm that was to come. The morning unfolded as it always did, a pattern of routines and shared moments that once felt unbreakable. Robert kissed his children goodbye, his heart swelling with love as he watched them head off to school, backpacks bouncing with youthful energy. He and Lisa exchanged a lingering look, a silent acknowledgement of their shared life, before he left for work. Yet, as he drove through familiar streets, the world passing by in a blur of color and motion, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that lingered at the edges of his awareness. It was as though a veil had been lifted, revealing cracks in the facade he had never dared to examine too closely. The office, usually a place of certainty and control, now seemed distant, its usual bustle a mere backdrop to the turmoil brewing within. Robert sat at his desk, the weight of unasked questions pressing down on him, questions he had never imagined needing answers to. He tried to focus on the tasks at hand, yet his mind kept drifting back to that subtle change in Lisa, the guarded moments that had begun to punctuate their life. Her late nights at work, the cautious glances at her phone, the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume. Small inconsistencies he had brushed aside, now forming a mosaic of doubt. But it was too soon for conclusions. The life they had built together demanded more than suspicion. It deserved clarity, understanding. Yet, as he sat there, surrounded by the hum of office life, Robert felt a growing determination. He would find out the truth, for himself, for his children, for the life he had cherished. And so, the seeds of change were planted, the prelude to a journey that would transform everything he believed in. A journey from trust to suspicion, from love to uncertainty, a journey that had only just begun to unravel. The evening air was cool, a gentle breeze whispering through the trees as Robert sat alone on the back porch, nursing a glass of wine. The backyard was a sanctuary he had cultivated, a space where he often escaped the pressures of the day. Yet tonight, it felt different, an echo of something lost, something slipping between his fingers. Lisa had texted earlier, claiming an obligation at work that would keep her late. It wasn't the first time, but tonight, the explanation felt hollow, the words lifeless on the screen. Robert stared at the message, the familiar number now a source of unease. There was a detachment in her words, a distance that no longer fit within their narrative of warmth and unity. His mind replayed the little things, the trivial details that had begun to unravel the fabric of their life. The hurried phone calls she took when she thought he wasn't listening, the slight hesitation before she answered a question. Each moment now seemed drenched with an overshadowing doubt. The receipt had been the first concrete hint, a small slip of paper forgotten in the pocket of her jacket. He had found it by chance, an expensive dinner for two at a restaurant they had once frequented together. It was a place of shared memories, anniversaries spent bathed in soft candlelight. Now it bore the weight of suspicion. Robert closed his eyes, the edge of the glass biting into his palm, grounding him in the moment. He had dismissed it initially, chalking it up to a potential business meeting or an oversight, yet the questions lingered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. His thoughts traced back to the sweltering summer afternoon he had first met Greg, the neighbor who had moved in 6 months prior. Greg was charming, always quick with a joke or a smile, the kind of person who effortlessly drew others in. Yet Robert now recalled the way Lisa had laughed a little too freely at his jokes, the shared glances that had passed between them. Tonight, as he sat alone, those moments replayed with a vividness that refused to blur. The unease they brought was a living, breathing thing, pressing against the walls of his chest. There was a guardedness in Lisa that he could no longer ignore, a smile that lingered too long, a secretive softness that seemed reserved for someone else. He wanted to dismiss it all, to cling to the life they had built together, to the laughter that had once come easily. But doubt had a way of weaving itself into the seams of normality, warping the familiar into something unrecognizable. As the stars blinked into existence overhead, Robert's resolve hardened. He couldn't continue like this, shadowboxing with suspicions and shadows. He needed answers, clarity, even if it meant unraveling everything he held dear. The thought was terrifying, but the alternative, living in the fog of doubt, was unbearable. With a deep breath, he rose from his seat, the decision forming with each step back into the house. He moved quietly through the rooms, his mind mapping out the beginnings of his plan. There were ways to uncover the truth, ways discreet enough to spare the children, to keep their world intact while he searched for the answers he needed. The weight of what lay ahead was daunting, yet it brought with it a strange sense of calm. For too long, he had been caught in the tide of uncertainty, but now there was direction, a path set by necessity and the unyielding need for truth. Robert knew the coming days would test him, would stretch the bounds of his endurance and his morals, but he was ready. The whispers of doubt demanded a confrontation, and he would face it head-on, armed with the tools of careful observation and quiet determination. As he prepared for bed, the house around him settling into its nighttime rhythms, Robert felt the familiar ache of loss mingled with the faint stirrings of purpose. He was stepping onto a path fraught with peril, but it was one he had to tread. For himself, for his children, for the truth that lay hidden beneath the veneer of their perfect life. The quiet hum of electronics filled the room as Robert sat at his desk, a silent sentinel in the dim light. The decision had been made, the path chosen, and now he was here, on the cusp of discovering the hidden truths that would redefine his world. His fingers danced over the keyboard, a symphony of determination and desperation guiding his actions. The surveillance cameras were a necessary evil, devices that felt like trespassers in his sanctuary but offered the promise of clarity. He had chosen their placement with care, each angle a calculated move in this painful game of discovery. The living room, her home office, even the driveway, each space carefully chosen to avoid intruding on the innocence of their children's lives. It was a delicate balance, protecting them while seeking the truth. As the camera feeds flickered to life on his screen, Robert couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, as if he were betraying the trust he had once held so dear. But the flicker of doubt in Lisa's eyes, the guarded way she held herself when she thought he wasn't looking, these were the new truths he had to navigate. There was no going back now. He had crossed a line, and with every click of the mouse, he edged closer to answers that might unravel the life he had worked so hard to build. The cameras weren't the only tool at his disposal. He had learned how to track digital footprints, how to uncover the invisible trails left behind by messages and emails that vanished into the ether. Late into the night, the room bathed in the soft glow of the screen, Robert uncovered what he had feared. Emails exchanged with Greg, each word a sharp knife against the fabric of his heart. There were photos too, moments captured in shadows, intimate and irrevocable. Each image spoke volumes, silent witnesses to the betrayal he could no longer deny. Robert sat back, the air heavy with the weight of his discoveries. The pain was visceral, a physical thing that twisted and turned within him. Yet, amid the turmoil, a sense of resolve began to take root. This was the evidence he had sought, the confirmation of the suspicions that had haunted him. It was a bitter solace knowing the truth, but a necessary one. He spent hours in quiet reflection, the night's silence punctuated only by the soft ticking of the wall clock. Memories surfaced, each tinged with the bitterness of deception. Their wedding day, the birth of their children, the countless small moments that had once filled him with joy now weighed heavily, tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. And yet, within this storm of emotions, Robert found clarity. He had been adrift for too long, caught in the currents of doubt and fear. But now, with the truth laid bare before him, he understood what he needed to do. Justice, in his mind, took shape, not as revenge for its own sake, but as a means to reclaim his life from the shadow of deceit. As dawn broke, casting a pale light across the room, Robert felt the first stirrings of a plan take shape. He would not let this betrayal define him. He would use it to build a stronger, more honest future for himself and his children. Lisa's choices would not hold him captive. He would rise above them. Closing the laptop, he stood, the physical act a manifestation of his newfound resolve. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Robert was prepared to face it head-on. With the evidence he had gathered, he could now confront the truth, and in doing so, lay the foundation for a new beginning. The secrets that had once tormented him were now his allies, tools to guide him through the fog of betrayal into the light of understanding. The path was clear, and Robert was ready to walk it, step by agonizing step, toward the justice he sought and the peace he desperately craved. The air was thick with unspoken words, a tension palpable enough to cut through the silence that hung over the dining room. Robert sat across from Lisa, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that belied the calm facade he wore. The table was set for a family dinner, but the chairs of Mark and Sophie were empty, their absence a stark reminder of the upheaval lurking beneath the surface. They were spending the night at a friend's house, a decision Robert had made to shield them from the crescendo he knew was inevitable. Lisa busied herself with the trivialities of setting the table, her every movement betraying a slight tremor, as if she too sensed the undercurrents of what was to come. Her eyes flickered toward him, briefly meeting his before skittering away to focus on the task at hand. It was a silent dance they had performed for weeks now, both aware yet unwilling to acknowledge the growing chasm between them. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice carrying a forced lightness, a veneer of normalcy neither could maintain much longer. Robert hesitated for a moment, the words he had rehearsed countless times caught in his throat. But he knew there could be no more delays, no more pretending. The evidence weighed heavily in his mind, a relentless reminder of the truths he could no longer ignore. "It was enlightening," he replied, the understatement hanging in the air as he watched her reaction. Her hand paused mid-reach for a serving spoon, a flicker of something, fear, maybe, passing over her features before she quickly masked it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They ate in silence, the clinking of cutlery against plates the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet. Robert's mind raced, reviewing every piece of evidence he had gathered, each fragment of her betrayal now pieced together into a chilling mosaic of deception. The moment arrived when he could hold back no longer. He set down his fork with deliberate care, his voice steady but edged with an undeniable resolve. "Lisa, there's something we need to talk about." She froze, the mask of composure slipping slightly as she met his gaze, her own filled with a mix of defiance and dread. "What is it, Robert?" He took a deep breath, the weight of his words heavy, yet necessary. "I know about you and Greg." The sentence hung between them, a bombshell that shattered the fragile facade they had maintained. Lisa's face paled, all pretense of cheer evaporating in an instant. What are you talking about?" Her voice was shaky, a last-ditch attempt at denial that crumbled under the gravity of the situation. "Don't," Robert interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "I have the emails, the photos. I know everything." For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the reality of his words settling over them like a suffocating blanket. Lisa's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving her as she sank back in her chair, eyes brimming with unshed tears. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. The ensuing silence was deafening, each heartbeat echoing in Robert's ears as he awaited her response. He had imagined this moment countless times, had prepared for anger, for denials, for pleas, but the raw vulnerability in her expression caught him off guard. "I never wanted to hurt you," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. But you did," Robert cut in, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and sadness. "You broke us, Lisa. And for what? For someone like him." Her silence was her admission, a tacit acknowledgement of the choices she had made, the paths taken that had led them to this point. Anger surged within Robert, a tide of emotions he struggled to contain. He had loved her fiercely, deeply, and the betrayal cut deeper than he had imagined possible. And yet, amid the tumult, there was a strange sense of release. The confrontation, painful as it was, had lifted the weight of secrets that had burdened him for so long. He had faced the truth, and that alone was a victory of sorts. The dinner lay forgotten, a hollow testament to the life they had once shared, now fractured beyond repair. Lisa's sobs filled the room, but Robert found no solace in her remorse. The damage was done, the trust shattered. He stood, the act final and resolute. "I need time," he said softly, the edge of his anger tempered by exhaustion. Time to think, to decide what's next. Lisa nodded, unable to meet his eyes, her own filled with the realization of what her actions had wrought. As he left the room, Robert felt a heavy burden lift, replaced by the cold clarity of resolution. There was no going back, no reclaiming what had been lost, but there was a path forward, a path he was determined to walk, alone if necessary, but with the knowledge that he had faced the darkest truths head-on. The confrontation had ended, but the journey was far from over. And as Robert stepped into the quiet of the evening, the seeds of his plan for justice took root, ready to grow in the fertile ground of his resolve. The faint glow of dawn filtered through the curtains as Robert sat in his study, the silence of the house a stark contrast to the storm swirling within him. The confrontation with Lisa had been a turning point, not only in their fractured marriage but in his own journey towards reclaiming control over a life spun wildly out of orbit. The truth was painful, a jagged edge he had to navigate, but with it came the clarity he so desperately needed. Robert knew he couldn't linger in the wreckage of what once was. There was a need, a burning desire within him to emerge from this stronger, not just for himself but for Mark and Sophie, who deserved a future unmarred by their parents' failings. Revenge was no longer just a concept but a calculated plan, one that would expose the deception and restore a semblance of justice to the broken pieces of his world. A sympathetic friend, someone who had been there through the whispers and doubts, had offered their assistance, providing an anchor in this turbulent sea. Michael was a colleague from the law firm, a quiet observer who had always seemed to understand the unspoken burdens Robert carried. Over a shared lunch one afternoon, Michael had offered not just his listening ear but his expertise, tools Robert would need to set his plan into motion. The meeting with Michael had been a revelation. "You've got everything you need," Michael had assured him, laying out options with the meticulousness of someone well-versed in the art of uncovering hidden truths. "It's just a matter of timing and execution." Robert had listened intently, absorbing every word, every strategy, as they formulated a plan that would leverage the evidence he had gathered. It wasn't just about exposing Lisa and Greg. It was about reclaiming his narrative, transforming betrayal into a powerful statement of resilience. He spent hours sifting through the digital trove he had amassed, emails, photos, texts, each piece meticulously catalogued, forming an ironclad case against the deceit that had infiltrated his life. Every late-night conversation, every clandestine meeting mapped out with precision, each a testament to the betrayal he couldn't allow to go unanswered. As the pieces fell into place, a sense of calm settled over Robert. He had regained control, wrested it from the chaos that had threatened to consume him. This was no longer about emotional retribution but about setting a precedent, ensuring that the scales of justice tipped in his favor. There was a certain satisfaction in the methodical nature of his preparations, each small victory fortifying his resolve. Robert reached out to a private investigator, someone recommended by Michael, to verify the details and shore up any potential weaknesses in the case. The investigator's findings only confirmed what Robert already knew. Greg was as complicit in the duplicity as Lisa, each step carefully documented, each lie meticulously recorded. With every piece of evidence, Robert felt the power shift, the balance returning to him. It was a delicate dance, orchestrating the revelation in a way that would not only impact Lisa and Greg, but insulate his children from the fallout. He was fiercely protective of them, determined to ensure that they emerged from this with as much of their innocence intact as possible. The culmination of weeks of planning was approaching. A company event, a public arena where the truth would be laid bare for all to see. Robert's anticipation was tempered by the knowledge that this was not just about revenge. It was about closure, about drawing a line under the pain and moving forward. As the day of reckoning loomed nearer, he found himself reflecting on the journey thus far, the confusion, the heartache, the moments of doubt that had threatened to unravel him. But now, standing on the precipice of justice, he realized that each challenge had tempered him, forged him into someone who understood the cost of betrayal and the power of resilience. Robert took a deep breath, the morning air crisp and invigorating as he stepped outside, the first light of dawn painting the world in hues of possibility. He was ready to face the truth, to embrace the justice he had crafted with his own hands, and to begin anew. In the quiet solitude of the morning, Robert understood that the path he had chosen was fraught with consequence, but it was a path that would lead him to a future unburdened by the past, a future he was resolutely determined to claim. The day of the company event arrived with an air of anticipation, a mixture of celebration and trepidation that seemed to linger in the atmosphere. Robert felt the weight of his decision, the knowledge of what was about to unfold adding a tremor of excitement to his otherwise steady demeanor. He had chosen this venue with care, a place where both personal and professional lives intersected, a crossroads where truths could no longer remain hidden in the shadows. The room was filled with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the sound of laughter, an orchestra of normalcy masking the tension that brewed beneath the surface. Robert moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues, offering smiles that never quite reached his eyes. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the moment that would soon change everything. He spotted Lisa across the room, her face a picture of ease as she engaged in lively conversation, seemingly untouched by the turmoil they had shared only days before. Greg was nearby, his charm in full display, oblivious to the truth about to descend upon him. Robert watched them, a silent observer, his resolve hardening with each passing second. The moment of unveiling approached, a crescendo he had orchestrated with precision. The room before him was filled with friends, acquaintances, people who respected him, who trusted him, all about to bear witness to the unraveling of the facade that had shielded lies for far too long. Robert took the stage, his presence commanding attention as the room gradually quieted, expectant eyes turning toward him. He addressed the crowd with a calm confidence, the practiced ease of a seasoned professional, setting the stage for the truth he was about to reveal. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, resonating with the authority of truth. "I stand before you today not just as a colleague or a friend, but as someone who values integrity above all else. It's time we celebrate not just our successes but the honesty and trust that bind us." A ripple of agreement passed through the room, nods and murmurs signaling their approval. Robert paused, allowing the silence to settle, the tension to build, before delivering the words that would transform the evening. There are moments in life when truth demands to be revealed, when authenticity must triumph over deception. Today, I choose to honor that truth. With a deft motion, Robert signaled to the AV technician in the corner, who nodded in understanding. The screen behind him flickered to life, casting a harsh light over the room, an unflinching illumination poised to expose what had been hidden. Gasps echoed as the images appeared, each frame a silent testament to the betrayal that had festered unnoticed. Emails, photographs, each piece meticulously arranged to tell the story that had haunted Robert for months. The room was transfixed, the collective realization dawning like a storm. Lisa's face drained of color, her composure shattered as recognition set in. Greg stood frozen, his confident demeanor crumbling under the weight of evidence displayed for all to see. The crowd murmured, waves of shock rippling through the gathering, eyes darting between the screen and the pair at the center of the scandal. Robert remained steady, watching the unraveling with a mixture of emotions. He felt no joy in their downfall, no satisfaction in their humiliation. Only a sense of relief, a cathartic release of the burden he had carried alone for too long. This, Robert continued, gesturing to the screen, is not just a story of betrayal but a reminder of the importance of facing our truths. It's a call to action, a plea for accountability. His words resonated, echoing through the room, driving home the gravity of the situation. Lisa's tear-filled eyes met his from across the room, a silent plea for understanding, but Robert's gaze remained unwavering, a testament to the resolve that had carried him this far. As the screen dimmed, replaced by the reality of the moment, Robert stepped down, weaving through the stunned crowd to the exit. The whispers followed him, a low hum of disbelief and reflection, but he paid them no mind. His focus was forward, beyond the chaos, toward the freedom he had fought so hard to achieve. As he exited the room, Leaving the spectacle behind, Robert felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The truth was out, the betrayal laid bare, and with it came a newfound sense of liberation. The chapter of deception had closed, and a new one awaited. A journey of healing, of rebuilding, of reimagining a future unshackled by the past. The night air was cool and refreshing as he stepped outside, the stars overhead a reminder of the vast possibilities that lay ahead. Robert took a deep breath, allowing the crisp air to fill his lungs, purging the remnants of bitterness and pain. He was free from the lies, free to embrace a life of authenticity and truth. With each step forward, Robert felt the stirrings of hope, the promise of new beginnings unfurling with every breath. The story was not yet over, but the path was clear, and he was ready to walk it, one step at a time, toward the justice he had claimed and the peace he so earnestly sought. The quiet of the morning enveloped Robert as he awoke, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the window, casting a gentle glow across the room. The events of the previous evening lingered in his mind, a vivid memory that marked the culmination of months of turmoil. Yet now, in the stillness of a new day, he felt an unfamiliar sense of calm, as if the world had finally shifted back into focus. He rose from bed, moving through the house with a newfound lightness in his step. The liberation of truth, of facing the betrayal head-on, had set him free, not just from the lies but from the anger and hurt that had bound him. The echoes of the company's event were still fresh, the collective shock and whispered judgment lingering in the periphery of his thoughts. But Robert had emerged from it with clarity, a clear path unfurled before him. In the kitchen, the morning ritual of coffee brewing filled the air with a comforting aroma. He savored the moment, the simplicity of it, a reminder that life continued despite the chaos that had threatened to consume him. As he stood there, the warmth of the mug grounding him, his thoughts drifted to the days ahead, a future that now seemed ripe with possibility. There was a knock at the door, a sound that pulled him from his reverie. Robert set his coffee down and opened the door to find Mark and Sophie standing there, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. He had called to explain that they would spend the night with friends, a necessary step to shield them from the immediate aftermath of his revelations. "Dad," Mark ventured, his voice hesitant. "Is everything okay?" Robert knelt to their level, opening his arms to envelop them in a hug. "Everything is going to be fine," he assured them, his voice firm and filled with warmth. "Things have been complicated, but we're going to get through it together." They settled into the living room, the familiar comfort of their presence soothing the edges of Robert's lingering anxiety. He explained, in terms they could understand, that sometimes adults make mistakes, big ones, and that it's important to face those mistakes and learn from them. He promised them honesty, openness, a stark contrast to the secrets that had rotted beneath the surface of their family life. As the morning unfolded, Robert found solace in their laughter, their innocence a balm for the wounds of betrayal. He watched them interact, their youthful exuberance infusing the room with a vitality he had missed in recent months. It was a poignant reminder of what truly mattered, their well-being, their happiness, the life he had promised to build anew. Later, as the sun reached its zenith, Robert found himself reflecting on the journey from trust to betrayal, from love to revenge. It had been arduous, a path fraught with heartache and moral ambiguity, yet he had emerged from it with a profound understanding of himself and the strength he had discovered along the way. He spent the afternoon immersed in activities that had once brought him joy. A leisurely run through the neighborhood, the rhythmic pounding of his feet on the pavement a steady beat that mirrored his resolve. He reconnected with friends, reaching out to those who had stood by him, their support a constant source of encouragement. As the day stretched into evening, Robert found himself contemplating the future. A future untethered from the past, unshackled by the betrayal that had threatened to define him. There was a sense of optimism in this newfound freedom, a belief that he could forge a path that honored the lessons learned and embraced the potential for growth and healing. Sitting on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, Robert felt a quiet contentment settle over him. The decisions he had made, the truths he had uncovered, had led him here, to a place of understanding, of acceptance. He would continue to rebuild, to mend the fractures in his life, guided by the resilience forged through adversity. Lisa's absence was still palpable, her choices casting long shadows over the remnants of their shared life. But Robert understood that forgiveness, while not yet within his grasp, was a necessary step toward closure. He would have to navigate this new dynamic, co-parenting with her, ensuring that Mark and Sophie felt loved and supported by both parents, despite the fissures in their relationship. In the quiet of the evening, Robert felt a renewed determination, a promise to himself to embrace each day with authenticity, to pursue happiness and fulfillment unencumbered by the ghosts of deceit. He was ready to face the world anew, with a heart tempered by experience and a spirit rekindled by hope. The journey was far from over, but as stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Robert knew he was on the right path. A path toward healing, toward a future where truth and love prevailed, where the echoes of the past served only as guides to a brighter, more honest tomorrow.